Welcome back to my series, Dance Mums Uncovered. It's about time that we do a deep dive into how sound effects, frankenbiting, Foley work, and other shady audio editing was used to try and twist our perception of reality. We'll also be looking at what it was like on set to have production constantly eavesdropping on the cast and forcing them to recite pre-written lines. Because there was much more to the Dance Mums audio than the producers cared to show. Feel free to share your thoughts on the following evidence. First, let's look at sound effects. The editors mostly used sound effects in order to make scenes more dramatic, but sometimes they also used sound effects in order to change storylines. For instance, Christi says that in Season 2, Episode 19, Leslie threw her microphone pack onto the floor. The producers wanted to cover up the fact that this was a piece of production equipment and avoid breaking the fourth wall. The editors decided to add a sound effect of a glass shattering in the hopes that the audience would assume Leslie threw a glass instead. Cathy claims that it really frustrated her to watch the scene where she hits Abby with her purse, because production added a dramatic sound effect in order to make it seem like she hit Abby harder than she really did.
It says here that Leslie throws a glass at the wall?
No, you know what Leslie threw? Her mic pack. She took her microphone off and threw her microphone.
The sound effect of that purse hitting you is awful because it's like boom. And I'm like, oh, come on. It was a swat.
And when Paige got hurt in Seasons 1 and 2, the producers added sound effects to make her injuries sound more dramatic. She and Chloe have explained that the sizzle of the curling iron in Season 1, Episode 1 was a sound effect added in post-production and was not actually real. Christi and Kelly have confirmed that when Paige broke her foot, they also added a sound effect that sounded like a bone crunching. Production even added a zapping noise to the clip where Paige gets her warts burned off, in order to make it seem more dramatic and painful.
Paige once got burned by walking into her curling iron. But when they showed it on the show, they made it seem so much more dramatic. They had like a sizzle and stuff.
Shockingly enough, that bone crunch noise was a sound effect. The doctor starts zapping the warts with the most aggressive sound effects.
Even cheering was occasionally edited into episodes. In Season 1, Episode 1, cheering noises were edited over the entire group dance, and yet every time they cut to the audience, everyone is just sitting there quietly watching. And on Lifetime's YouTube channel, they use the exact same audio clip of an audience cheering again and again after dances. Next, let's explore audio operators. On the first day of filming Dance Mums, Christi says that a sound operator told her not to worry about the microphones because if they weren't near the cameras, they couldn't be heard. She quickly found that this was an absolute lie, and that production could listen to the cast at all times. Abby says that sometimes while she was wearing a microphone, she would be overheard talking about super talented students from other studios. Then all of a sudden, the producers would contact these kids and they would be asked to compete against the ALDC. The audio operators would apparently listen to the cast when they used the bathroom, and could sometimes hear the cast's hearts beating. Christi and Kelly say that during filming they used this to their advantage, telling production that they wanted cocktails by speaking into their microphones.
For the very first day I was ever filmed, the sound person who worked with me that day said, "Don't worry, if you're not near the camera, the mics can't hear you."
That is not the case.
You guys would have to follow us in the bathroom at times. I can literally remember you saying something like, "I need to turn down your mic. I can hear your heart beating."
And we love them, and they're so good. They would pick up on
They
that.
would hear it, call them.
The kid that we were talking about amongst ourselves would be on the stage right before our kids and throw our kids off.
I mean, we could have been talking like in the parking lot or talking at lunch and they still hear us.
Or we would be like, "Excuse me, can I have a cocktail?" And one would appear.
Yeah.
We would just say it right in our microphone. We'd talk to our chest and be like, "Excuse me, I need a drink." And the next thing you knew, voila, you had one.
Christi says that she was infamous for taking off her microphone, and Melissa says that she once ripped off her microphone and broke it. She claims that production threatened to charge her $800 for it.
I was infamous for throwing my mic. I'm like, Take this, and I'm not saying another word. And they'd be like, you're not allowed to take your mic off.
I mean, I've ripped my microphone off and broken it, and they said they were going to charge me $800. I'm like, no, you're not.
According to JoJo, on the set of Dance Mums and ALDC, there were particular codes that the audio people used in order to indicate how much noise the cast was allowed to make. The phrase hard ice meant that they weren't allowed to make any noise. Ice meant that they shouldn't talk unless it's an emergency. And slush meant not to talk about anything that's important, like refraining from discussing the week's drama while they're off camera.
On set, ice means to be quiet. Hard ice means be dead silent. Do not speak. And then there's a thing called slush. That's more of a thing that they use later, more so on Dance Moms. Like, all right, y'all are on slush right now. Like during lunch, for example, you can talk, but like don't talk about like what's going on the show.
An audio operator from the show has admitted that they hid spare microphones in areas where the cast spent a lot of time, in order to get as much information and footage as possible. And when a kid was upset, the operators would receive orders to put the boom microphones in their faces. Christi recalls that one day she and Chloe were stuck in traffic for an hour. Christi called ahead, telling production that they were going to be late, but when they showed up, production put a microphone on Chloe, even though the kids weren't usually given microphones. Christi became furious because she knew this meant that production wanted their lateness to be part of a storyline.
You know, like, should we do what's called a plant mic, which means I get one of the spare mics and kind of hide it in a bush. You kind of figure out where the cast go and hide. Paige was having a real tough time, and she was crying her eyes out. And I was asked, like many times, by a producer to get a boom in there.
I was stopped in traffic for almost an hour, couldn't move, and I called everyone on set. Please don't use this against her when I get there. When I got there, they pulled me into the into the den, and they were trying to mic Chloe. And I said, what are you micing Chloe for? Because the kids weren't mic'd. And I said, stop right there. I said, nope. I said, this is not an on-camera story.
Evidence number 3, editor manipulation. The editors would often splice up the audio in order to fabricate storylines. One of the most common techniques is called frankenbiting. This is when they splice together audio that doesn't belong in the same sentence to make it sound like someone said something that they never did. For instance, if a cast member said, I like doing lyrical solos, and also said, ugh, I hate hip-hop dancers, they could cut them together to say, ugh, I hate lyrical dancers. You can hear frankenbites frequently on the show if you listen out for sudden changes in tone of voice and words that are cut short.
Abby wants Mackenzie to grow as a dancer and to dance like Maddie.
My biggest competition for the music video is probably going to be Maddie.
Sorry, I'm a real dance mom, and I will stand here.
Then there are lines that are inserted into scenes where they clearly don't belong. There are several instances where we hear someone speaking, and all of a sudden we can't hear the room's echo anymore. And other times the quality of the dialogue takes a sudden dip.
Back leg isn't high enough. The group dance this week is called Runaways. They end up all alone and on the streets. You haven't been feeling well, so you won't be dancing this week. I want to get on to the competition.
We also must be suspicious of dialogue where we can't see the cast's faces. It can easily be used to put audio where it doesn't belong.
Your kid's washed up.
You're just jealous that Bryn has had a better season than Kendall.
And lastly, you'll notice that in arguments, sometimes you can hear small clips of people bickering in the background. This probably happens because when a cast member yells in such close proximity with other cast members, their yelling is also picked up by the microphones of others. The words are often quiet, and it makes it really hard to tell what is being said. But as a general rule, if you hear lots of quiet voices in the background of fights, it's a good indication that the scene has been heavily edited.
And your plastic surgery and your tummy tuck.
You don't know a thing.
4. Dance music. All of the music used on the show was from a library of music that the production company had paid to use. This is why you'll often hear Dance Mums music on other TV shows. One of the reasons why tap solos weren't very common on the show was because it was very hard to edit the sound of the taps. In Maddie's solo, these boots were made for walking. Production didn't have permission to use the original song that she danced to. They therefore had to replace it with another song and add the taps back in somehow. Abby has claimed that they never had separate microphones to record the tapping, So it's very possible that they had to use a Foley artist to make tapping noises in time with Maddie dancing. Nonetheless, the executive producer of Dance Mums, Brian Stinson, wasn't a fan of tap because he claims that the microphones would always make the taps sound weird.
One thing I was sad about is our kids never did a tap number. Like, I know Maddie did a couple of tap solos, but all of our kids were good tappers.
We had problems translating that on TV with the sound. It sounded like a mess.
The editors would also chop up the music of dances when they didn't want to show the full routines. One of the worst I've ever heard was for Mackenzie's All I Want solo. The song is absolutely massacred, and the editors didn't even manage to cut it so that the beats of the song lined up. It's truly a mess, and if you rewatch it, you'll know what I mean. It also seems like this license must have run out at some point, because in the clips we've seen so far for the Dance Mums reunion, the songs for each dance have been replaced with other music. And finally, we have feeding lines. Countless cast members have insisted that Dance Mums is not scripted, but many of them have also said that production would give them lines to say during their interviews. Abby, Kelly, and Cathy have all revealed that sometimes the producers would prepare lines for them.
It was ruthless, and they were just feeding them lines, and you could not leave, you could not get out of that chair unless you said what they wanted you to say.
They made me say stuff, and they would like force you to say stuff.
You would go in and, they'd have all those costumes behind you, and they would actually give you bites to say.
The kids were apparently also encouraged to say mean things about one another. Melissa and Kelly say that their kids would become very upset when they were being pushed to say these things. In fact, one of the producers named James has stated outright on Back to the Bar that he worked with Paige to make her say that she was embarrassed by the mums' behaviour at the Joffrey auditions.
Some of the things they used to want my kids to say, like they would, like in the interviews, and my kids would be like, I am not saying that about my friend.
Well, the first season, they wanted Maddie to say all the stuff about how good she was, and then Kenzie, all those little quotes that she said were cute, but they made her say them, but then they wanted her to say these mean things, and she came running out.
Paige says, our moms were really rude and bad. I hope they don't embarrass me again. I think somebody told her to say that.
I might have worked with Paige to come up with something along those lines.
Cathy says that while she was sitting in the audience at competitions, the producers would text her with lines to say to Abby. And Melanie Hulsman says that at Candy Apples, the producers would sometimes hold up whiteboards with lines that they wanted them to say. This is very similar to what Abby has said, where she claimed that she would be given lines about the competition's name and location to recite at Pyramid. The mums say that every week production would make her repeat these lines over and over again.
I had to constantly sit behind you and, them texting to say, get in her ear, say this, say that.
Hessa, the producer, always used to get me in trouble.
Yes.
They had to take away the whiteboards because...
Yeah. And write things for you to say.
And somebody was probably holding up a sign behind the camera saying my last text. And they would hold up what city we were going to.
So there were cue cards.
And where the competition was. Just for those three things. The title, the city, the name of the competition.
And you can tell when Abby said something and then the producers are like, you need to re-say that. And then she said it again. It was like
100 times that happened.
So what do you guys think? How much of what we heard on Dance Mum should we believe? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.